I started these in lockdown to give teachers some free resources that they could use with their students. And as I've been approaching episode 100 of Wheellerplays story, I wondered what it would be that would cause me to create the 100th episode. And bizarrely, it was today's shopping, and it's something to do with this play. Too Much Punch for Judy, which is my most performed play and now my second most best-selling play, to Hard to Swallow, but the most performed play by a long way, having been performed by 6,000, a bit more than 6,000 times. Anyway, what a revelation my shopping trip to the supermarket was. I happened to notice this magazine in the supermarket with an article about Steve Marriott. Little was I to know what the article was going to reveal. A kind of shocking thing. And I knew a book was coming out about Steve. I've got it on order. It's called All or Nothing by Spence. He interviewed me for it because he wanted some information about Toni, as in Judy, who Steve married in the latter part of his life. She was his third wife, I think. I read the article and I wasn't prepared for what I discovered. It's something I didn't know. And it's to do with how I thought the second accident or incident came about, which is that Steve had died in a house fire. I knew they'd been to America. I knew that he'd gone to record with Peter Frampton, a very, very famous guitarist, and do an album with him. I knew they'd come back and I knew there'd been an argument. I didn't know what the argument was about. And that's the revelation that happened here. And Steve left Toni on that evening in someone else's house while she was asleep, went back home, in a drug-induced state, smoking a cigarette, set fire to his bedroom in a thatched cottage, and the next morning he was dead. And poor Toni woke up to that. And then 2 years later, she turned to alcohol, and she ended up on the same stretch of road, killing poor Penny Jessup, who was travelling entirely innocently. And I've always been told that that's what the story was. There's something else, a huge thing that was dropped in this article. I'm just going to read it to you with kind of no frills. It's very, very sad to hear this, and it is an extra twist to the Too Much Punch story. So, it was mostly to please Poulton, that's Judy Poulton, Steve's wife, that Marriott, despite heavy reservations, reunited with Peter Frampton in January 1991. The big lure was the prospect of a $3 million advance for a one-off Frampton and Marriott album and an American tour. I mean, really exciting stuff. Poulton and Marriott travelled together to LA. Marriott promised Frampton he'd stay straight, but that didn't last long. This is Peter Frampton talking. He had this Perrier water bottle with him, in fact 2 bottles. And I realised it wasn't water in those bottles, says Frampton. It was white wine, and it pissed me off. Frampton had hoped that Marriott would get it all out of his system and complete the recordings. And here's the bit. Instead, Marriott fled the country with Poulton after she was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. This is 2 years before the second accident and 8 years after the first incident that had killed her sister. And it was on the day after that Steve was killed in a house fire. Complicating matters further, Poulton suffered a serious head injury circa 2014 or 15, from which she is yet to fully recover. I'm not sure what Steve would have thought about this, says Toby, his son. Probably would just tell us it's money and just to get on with our lives instead of getting involved with the mess. but he has to, but to have these people represent him is very hard for myself and Steve's other kids to accept. There's obviously big discussions going on because Judy, Toni, has ended up as his third wife, being in control of the Steve Marriott archive, which is quite valuable. I'm absolutely in shock about this. I absolutely knew nothing. And I can remember one thing Judy said to me. She said, I hope the second half of my life is happier than the first half. I'm so sad to be reporting that I don't think it has.